Donc bonsoir et bienvenue à cette rencontre laser. Welcome to this laser meeting. It's going to be in English, but I'm going to do the introduction in French anyhow, and then we'll switch to another language. Donc ce soir, c'est une rencontre laser un peu différente. On accueille, comme d'habitude, 2 projets. Donc Laura Cinti qui est ici et qui va présenter avec Debbie Jewett qui est sur cet ordinateur. Et suivi ensuite de Meredith, root-bernstein et Marit Mihklepp dans la deuxième après la pause. Laura Cinti est la lauréate, une des deux lauréats, puisque les autres c'est un groupe mixte, du projet Roots and Seeds pour la création d'une nouvelle œuvre. Et Marit Mihklepp est la lauréate de la résidence Maison Malina, également dans ce projet Roots and Seeds. Donc ce soir, cette session est dédiée au projet Roots and Seeds 21, Biodiversity Crisis and Plant Resistance. Et nous avons le plaisir d'avoir Tatiana Kuroshkina. We have Tatiana Kuroshkina, qui est la fondatrice et responsable de l'agence Coartis à Barcelone et qui est à l'initiative du projet Roots and Seeds, qui est donc un projet européen soutenu par Creative Europe. Et je vais lui passer le micro pour qu'elle nous explique un petit peu quel est ce projet, comment il est né, qui sont les partenaires et ce qu'on fait. And she's going to speak in English.
Thank you so much, Annick. Sorry, I'm well, it's great to see you, many faces that I already know. And as Annick said, we are partners in the project Roots and Seeds. This project has a duration of 2 years, and it's about to end in September. And within the frame of it, we are producing 2 artworks, one of them by Laura. She will explain a bit more. We have done 3 multidisciplinary cartographies, and we're working now in the guidelines of those cartographies so that everyone else can experience what we did. And Annick is organizing, this is the second laser event related to the project. Also, there are some workshops that were done in the libraries to read fragments of the very famous novel that we all know, but most of us didn't pay enough attention to the plants that are named in those novels, so we're reading those fragments. The idea is to get also emotionally in contact with the plants, and as well to find out what are the real, what is happening, why is this biodiversity crisis, how it affects us, what are the major key players here. We are trying to investigate and to bring awareness about it through the collaboration of artists and scientists. There are 4 partners involved in Roots and Seeds. It's OLATS, it's Co-Artists, then there is the University of Barcelona and the Ars Electronica Festival. In this edition of Ars Electronica in September, we will show all the final results, all the artworks, the research that we do about the collaborations between artists and scientists, what are the social impact do they have, these kind of collaborations, how effective they are, what could be done better, or what is already working very well. As well, there will be shown experimental publication that Annick is working on. Again, those guidelines about the multidisciplinary cartographies and many more things. So if you are in Ars Electronica this year, please visit us. And that's it. I'm very glad to be here with you today and to find out how also the residency go. And so I'm passing my micro.
Donc ce soir, il y a plusieurs singularités dans cette rencontre laser. La première singularité, encore une fois, c'est que ces deux projets qui sont portés au sein d'un même projet plus large, Roots and Seeds. Mais la deuxième qui pour moi me semble vraiment importante, c'est que les deux projets sont en cours d'élaboration. Que Laura et Debbie sont en train encore de travailler sur la création de l'œuvre à la recherche donc de cette femelle pour Iwoodi. Et Marit avec Meredith, la résidence de Marit était une résidence de recherche. Et elle est arrivée il y a un peu plus d'une semaine. Donc elles sont encore dans elle est encore dans cette phase de recherche. Et dans l'ambition de discuter de collaboration art-sciences, je trouve que c'est particulièrement intéressant ce soir parce que précisément on a deux projets qui sont encore en cours de construction. Donc comment se construit le projet, c'est aussi important. Donc maintenant, je vais organiser les ordinateurs pour que Laura et Debbie soient en ligne et je ferai une introduction officielle de toutes les deux. Donc j'ai le plaisir maintenant de présenter le nouveau duo, Marit Mihklepp et Meredith root-bernstein. Marit est une artiste d'origine estonienne qui est basée aux Pays-Bas, donc qui habite aux Pays-Bas, et dont le travail qui met l'accent sur les langages existants ou spéculatifs entre les humains et les autres que humains, mais pas seulement du vivant. Elle travaille aussi beaucoup avec des pierres, working with stones also. Et en 2022, en 2022, elle participe ou elle est partie prenante de plusieurs résidences, dont le Black Earth at Valley of Possible au Chili. Et after a residency at the Manina House, she's going directly to Chile to do this other residency. Meredith speaks French, actually, so you can ask her in French. Meredith est ethnobiologiste et scientifique de conservation. Elle est chercheuse au CNRS et elle travaille sur la transformation, la dégradation des écosystèmes et comment y répondre. Meredith a aussi travaillé au Chili. Elle a d'autres projets, notamment au Lesotho. Donc peut-être ça sera, si c'est toujours d'actualité, ça sera intéressant d'échanger avec Debbie à ce sujet. Et ce qui est intéressant aussi avec Meredith, c'est qu'elle a un tropisme artistique, je vais dire ça comme ça. Et donc toutes les deux se sont trouvées. Et c'est des questions que je poserai sur comment vous vous êtes trouvées. Et donc elles vont parler de la recherche qu'elles ont démarrée il y a un peu plus d'une semaine dans la résidence de Marit sur ces tas, ces piles, ces monticules et comment ça s'exprime. So I'll let you now start your presentation.
Mound, a large pile or heap of earth, stones, leaves, etc., like a small hill. The most primordial technique.
I see, okay. So we are doing a kind of exploration of the most primordial technique, which are mounds, heaps, or piles. And we wanted to start by pointing out that Paris is a really appropriate place to do this, and I will try to, can you do that actually? Try to show you. This little setup is very much something we invented about 3 hours ago, so it doesn't work very well.
but we try to do it analog. Yes?
It's upside down. It's upside down and backwards. You can't read it. But anyway, it's this book called The Earth is an Architecture. And they say here on page 84, Paris, a radial concentric city, has been installed, it just so happens, in the middle of this pile of plates, meaning geological plates, precisely where the subsoil is enriched by the extremely thick accumulation of different materials. So, in a very basic way, Paris itself is situated over a geological pile of multiple plates that have accumulated piles of sediment over time. So, everything in Paris is situated on top of a pile to begin with. And then we began our exploration of piles, and we'll show you a little bit sort of the progression of how we went about doing so. But I think to begin, the other thing that we wanted to say is sort of why we're interested in piles, of course, to begin with. So for me, when we say that the pile is the most primordial technique, what that means is something very ecological. So one way to think about ecology in a very abstract sense is that everything in ecology is just different piles of materials that move around and are transformed into some other material and form some other accumulation or pile somewhere else. So ecology is just a huge circulation of piles of different biotic and abiotic materials.
Which could be also said about art, I think. It's also like a reshuffling of different piles and different, like structures and textures.
So I'll just give an example so people understand what I mean. But for example, a very important type of pile in ecology is soil, a huge pile of the remains of things that were eaten and that died and have been, eaten further and further by smaller and smaller animals until we get to microbes. And this is the remains. It's the remains of things that cannot be eaten by microbes, and that's the soil. It's a huge pile of funny-shaped molecules. And then another really important pile for me in my work, for example, are piles of leaves that form underneath forests, underneath trees. And you can also think of it's the primordial technique because it's a technique because the fact of accumulating soil or the fact of accumulating leaves allows new processes of transformation to happen. So, sorry, I need to touch this regularly. So, in a pile of leaves will degrade in a different way because I may have. Why is it not connecting? It's just
degraded, no?
No, it falls asleep. So the pile itself, being a high concentration, allows different interactions to occur within it, different chemical reactions of change to a new material, for example. And then you can also think of many structures in ecology as being elaborations on piles. So, for example, a nest is an elaborate pile of sticks and other materials of that nature that have been, the bird has arranged in a specific, more elaborate way, so it's not just a pile. I mean, in some cases, birds really just put their eggs onto just the soil and don't make anything, but they put them together, they make a very complex pile with a specific structure, and as we'll discuss, all piles have a structure anyway, but a specific structure could be a nest, or here we have ant nests, which are also piles, but they have piles of pine needles, for example, in this case, but they also have a very specific internal structure, so that, again, they're an elaboration on a pile. And you can think of all of, in fact, the evolution of life as just an elaboration on different piles. So like when you evolve the first cells, it's like inside you have a high accumulation of specific molecules you need to do life, so you have little piles of the molecules you need, and you keep them inside your membrane. And then you just elaborate on that more and more until you get multicellular life and so on and so forth. So everything is just an elaboration on a pile.
So yes, we then together we went for walks actually in Paris, and we were of course looking for different heaps and piles. And this is now the first pile we found. Meredith is very observing here. Can you see her? Yes. So this is in Jardin de Plantes, and yeah, we were happy to find it. I mean, other people were all ignoring. This is the other aspect about piles, that nobody really pays attention to them. But and we also, of course, we didn't really know what. I mean, we were looking at it and then we understood what is it. But if, as you can see, of course, it's some waste material. For us, it's waste, but of course, for some other organisms, it's actually quite valuable material. But in Jardin de Plantes, it's, of course, you need to take out these different things to also keep the garden organized for humans. So here is another, the second one that we found, and this was, you can also see that they're actually already quite different. So the second one is much more, it was much more furry, like it had much more grass, and also soil, but it was much more like chunks, less than actually like a pile, what I would think is a pile. So I already had some learning from the pile in this moment. And another aspect which was funny was this, that very often, you will see it also in the next piles, that they, like piles and also holes, they are very often isolated with fences. So that they are to protect sometimes piles, but sometimes also humans, of course, because if it's like building waste or something like that, it can be very dangerous for us to, I don't know, start taking it home or something. And here you can see actually a circular pile. So it was this kind of a pile around, yeah, a young tree, and it's in Jardin de Luxembourg. And I was also lucky enough to have another kind of a pile on my hand. I don't know who it was, but here it is. And yes, I don't know, we can also show just these piles maybe faster, because these are just some building materials from Luxembourg Gardens. And then there was a beautiful discovery. So this is, actually it doesn't really look like this on the photo, but it's quite a big pile. And it's big, but it's invisible. I mean, first I saw children playing there. So children are really attracted to piles, right? This is like some of the humans that still like piles. And we could also actually climb on it. And yes, and Meredith even, because she really merged in, so she really tried to become the pile, because she had such colors. And yeah, but then what was interesting was also this, that it was a huge pile, but it was not actually like a waste pile, right? Like it's actually more like a storage pile. So this is not leftovers, but this is actually the parts. It's actually tiny stones that are used for the road in Jardin de Luxembourg. So I guess we were just thinking also that maybe it's just because of this that people and animals are walking with their feet and paws, and maybe sometimes we bring it home or to other places. So once in a while you have holes or you have absences, which needs to be then filled with this pile. So yeah, whenever there is a pile, there is always a hole. So that's kind of, or whenever there is a hole, there is a pile somewhere.
Yes, because not all piles come with holes. Some piles are just piles of other piles.
Yes. We continue. So we continue now more in the city. And of course, yeah, like here you cannot see so well, but of course you can see that there is a fence. And it's really like something very precious is behind the fence. And then for us it was, but for most of the people, of course, it was just there that you don't, when you're walking on the street, you don't really fall into it. And we also found this very beautiful pile where there are some books. And this was also one of the most attractive piles for humans. So we saw also other humans then gazing at it. And we were actually on our way to Art Library of Paris, actually, because it was a bit rainy day, so we thought maybe there are also other artists or researchers that have been interested in piles. Yes, so now we will have Lara Almarsequi, Construction Rubble of Secession's Main Hall from 2010. Maybe some of you have seen it, but yeah, she's known also for using these discarded materials and also like things that are normally overlooked, and working a lot with quarries and how to show these sites of which are very often invisible and you don't really see, then showing them. Yes. Anish Kapoor's It's from the book Unconformity and Entropy. And I really liked it because he actually made this pile making machine. So there is like basically machines that make all these beautiful piles, and yeah, they look a bit like also intestines. So in that sense, it's also interesting that there is this transformation also that Meredith was talking about, that pile is never also just a pile. It also becomes another pile, and then also it will also kind of go into the earth, and then again there is another pile, and it's constant process. And we also found Bernard Venet's pile of coal. This is maybe you also know this work. It's from 63, I think. 1963, but it was kind of going on in different museums for a long, long time. And Teresa Murak's Sculpture for the Earth. It's also beautiful work. Meredith found this. You want to continue? I can also make piles. Christian Boltanski's person. Many piles of clothes.
This is a pile of Hubert Duprat. And this is a pile by Félix González Torres, which is also, I think, quite a very well-known pile. And he has another pile work, but we just represent this one. And this is from the Anselm Kiefer show that was at Le Grand Palais Éphémère.
And then we have also Alessandro Furchino Capria's untitled pile, which is found from a magazine.
And I think it's also worth mentioning in these different artworks that use piles, you notice that the pile does not always have the same, the pile is not innocent, right? Some piles are sad, some piles are bad, some piles you really shouldn't exist, maybe like the work of, this is a sad pile because I think it represents his dead lover, and of course the piles of Christian Boltanski are also very sad, unfortunate piles about the memory of horrible loss and so on, and somehow make reference to piles of dead bodies. So piles are not just wonderful, nice transformational, techniques. This is also a sad pile from Ukraine, where they're protecting a statue with a pile of sandbags. So piles, of course, have many meanings and moral valences and contexts in which they take on different roles.
Yeah, so we humans, are also good at making piles. Some are also very often quite hidden, which we also found in, it was Ile Saint-Germain on the island. And then we actually stumbled upon a very valuable pile. At least I learned a lot there. So here it is. And there is also a bigger picture, so be ready here. So this is a special pile, because also actually it had a sign as well on it. And we learned that this pile is for many animals and insects. So the hedgehogs are going for their winter sleep there, and it's also a place where the snakes and slowworms are laying their eggs. And it's also it's a food source, of course, for many insects and insectivorous birds, and it's also hunting ground for weasels and falcons. So, and of course there is so many billions and billions of microbes there as well. So it's a home for many, and also, so yeah, and there I think also we had this beautiful idea that, or we were just looking at it, and then you really start to wonder what is inside the pile. And then we actually thought, just also listening to last presentation, I thought it would be nice to have some kind of a pile scanner, or but that you don't destroy the pile, but somehow you see how the life, but of course it's also not only just to see it as with human eyes, but somehow also to really be maybe even in a different scale, because of course some of the movements are really so small and so slow that you would not even be able to see it with human senses or perceive it with human senses, but it would be somehow interesting. So we were really standing there and meditating on it.
Yeah, and I think this also is a pile where you understand that the structure of the pile is important, and that if you disturb the structure, you're also disturbing a thing that the pile is doing or making, which is why you, in this case, for example, they have a sign and they have a fence and they don't want you to get close to it. So it also is a good example of how the pile is an archive, and a technology. So it's holding knowledge, it's holding it within the structure, and it's holding this possibility of transformation. Yeah.
You can just continue with the transformation. But here, yeah, it's another pile that had a sign. So there is also, of course, to show the process of composting, or how like different parts of the same park are then, so also to make it easy to understand. And there was another beautiful pile, which was almost like a shrine. So we really somehow started to have a sense of respect for piles. And I think also they are worthy of our respect because of all these different animals also that live there, but also, yeah, I mean, we all come from a pile. Yeah, just some more piles. But then, I mean, first we were really more into the encountering of the piles, and then also just seeing them and observing them and smelling them and touching them, and more like sensory approach. But then we thought, okay, maybe we could also still have a little bit of more structure ourselves, like how we approach the pile. So we thought of maybe it's nice to interview the pile somehow.
Yeah, so just maybe to show you a little bit of our process very quickly, like, you just hold it up while it wakes up again. Oh, here we are. It's too close really to understand what's on this page, but this is one of my field notebooks, and so in the beginning we were just taking some photographs and some notes, and just as we were talking and looking at the different piles and maybe sketching them. But then after Saint-Germain, we decided to have a kind of a method, not really a scientific method, of course, but maybe based on this idea of having what we had learned from the piles so far, and then we were going to interview all of the piles in like a more standardized way that we encountered from then on. So here we are at the park in La Courneuve, which itself is a giant pile from Les Halles. And then we found sub-piles on these piles, and we asked a set of questions, which, shall I read the questions?
Yes.
So for each pile that we found, we asked, what kind of knowledge are you an archive of? What kinds of movements are you holding? How did you get here? And how would you make me part of you? And we also, mainly not as a way of being scientific, but because I needed to test my new GPS device, we took GPS points. I'll show you that. I think we'll look at the pictures first.
So we'll look at this later, yes? Mm-hmm. So then, yeah, we were also looking at the piles. I mean, this is so obviously also, we thought that for humans, piles are very often something you have to climb on, right? And then for other beings, like they already got the point that it's much more interesting to be inside. But then this is a good example of kind of stairway to a pile. But you just go up there and then it's like nothing. It's a little bit like you go to a mountain, and I mean it's great to go to the summit, but I think it's more interesting what happens, inside and around. Yes.
This was a very nice pile that I was hoping we would find this kind of pile, because we already found a bit of animal feces, but this is a nice feces pile from rabbits. So for rabbits, of course, their middens, as they are called technically, are very important because they serve a signaling function to sort of show where their territory is, and probably the rabbits can also smell how their other rabbit mates are feeling from the way that their feces smells, as in many other species. So this is the information that this pile is archiving is very social and very spatial and very important for rabbits.
And maybe also actually we should answer some of the questions we posed.
Well, we'll show it on the
we show it.
image.
Okay. Then the pile is okay. Yes, and here we are now. Actually, we were there with Annick in Parc de Mound. And it's also an interesting site. Of course, you all know that it's historically also such a gathering of different things, also painful and dark stuff. So it was an execution site, and it was also, of course, limestone and gypsum quarry, but also a site for slaughtering horses, and of course also a dump for sewage and trash, basically. And it was very smelly, but then of course it was turned into a very it kind of tries to imitate nature, like Annick was also saying, but it's not. It's like very artificial there, and even the forest ground, it's like you see that somebody has been really brooming or vacuuming there, so it's so clean. But then there was a pile actually, and there was it's an ivy pile, right? This is the one that we actually tried. It was so light that we also could actually lift it and change its shape for a little bit.
And I think it was a pile that was there by accident because it was not hidden and there was no fence around it. I think someone just pulled it down from the tree.
Yes. This is a very beautiful pile. So it was also, like a park where all the trash was, or not trash, sorry, the piles were, like let's say the more less organized things were very visible, or these artificial things were very visible, and natural things, no. What am I saying? I'm just trying to follow up on a thought, but okay, let's just continue with this. So this garden waste and also kind of a compost pile, this was not in the middle of the park, but I mean it was of course again caged, like double caged, even in this sense, because it had this metal trunk, but then also it had an actual cage, and it was very complicated and complex. And there was even like somebody. I mean, there were the blossom petals, but then which made it also a bit colorful. But then you could also see 3 banana peels, so you can also see how the people are adding to it at the same time when it's also from the garden, but it's also that it was a garden for the people and even like a pile of people in a way. It's coming, yeah. Yes. So Meredith is now trying to show also the fancy machine, the GPS. Yes? Or we continue. And then we were one of the few ones who were very excited and happy around also these normal trash piles. Like there is one, and there is there is also. I mean, Meredith was a great model also. So we.
Yeah, there are very few people who stop and take photographs of trash. So it was just continued our habit of being the only people paying attention to a pile of something, and everyone else is not paying attention.
And then on Sunday, I thought I will not look for piles, but then there was a beautiful stone pile, which I don't know the technique, or I don't know how it's exactly made, but I somehow suspect it reminds me of something from Estonia, like a making of stone walls. And also I think in Japan there is a very similar technique, just using, I mean, this is very, very geometric, but it can be also much more, like organic, but at the same time the stones are natural, and then you just try to fit them together. So there is this combination of the crafts, and then also of the human hand, but then also of the stones that are actually molded by these different conditions and time.
And so these are just 2 maps that we made with my GPS device. So we just, made a point where the sub-pile on top of the large geological or landscape pile was. And here you can just see we have written in for one of the piles, pile number 2, La Courneuve, the answers we gave. So in this one, what kind of archive, well, what are you an archive of? It was an archive of geometry. This was one of the hills, one of the artificial hills. So it's an archive of geometry and landscape ideals. What kind of movements are you made of? Wind in the flowers, insects pollinating, bulldozers that made it, and I really liked this image, which was from Marit, of the AutoCAD clicking and dragging, which also designed it. How did you get here? Heavy machinery and dump trucks, probably. And how can we become part of this pile? We thought that historically we could have become part of the pile by contributing to the waste or the soil that was in Les Halles. Of course, we didn't do that personally. Other people did. And maybe in our case we could sit on it and sort of become a sub-pile on top of the pile. And this is just another example. This was in Butte-Chaumont. So here, pile 3 at Butte-Chaumont, you just see a picture of the pile itself, which is this little, this was a pile of sticks which had been cut off of the trees, or like shoots had been cut off from the trees, and for some reason made into a pile instead of just left where they fell. So that's just an example of how we were recording or archiving. We're making our own archive of the archives that are piles. And then we just have a couple of things.
Yes, we can finish with this, because then, yes, I think it's... So another kind of a book file from Meredith. So you can see what she's reading. Busy. Which also is about the way that piles are archives of knowledge. So we all know the structure contains information. We all know that in a book pile that we make ourselves, that there's a reason why the books are in a specific order, and it's maybe, in fact, easier to find a book that's in a pile rather than a book that you put away somewhere where you think it belongs in a bookshelf. Certainly for me, when I put the book away, I can never find it again, but if it's in a pile, I know where it is, because I know what I was also reading at the same time. And if you made the pile also. But it's also interesting, that pile making, I mean, it's such an ancient technique, but it's also a very contemporary technique. We still make piles. They are still relevant for us as well, not only for other beings, but also for humans. But yeah, for sure, I mean, this is a very impressive architecture also from termites. It's also actually from Anish Kapoor's book when he was doing research on this pile machine. And that's the final image now. And also, we just started really with this definition of heaps and piles, but I wanted to say thank you also for root-bernstein and also for Annick for really coming with us and also finding, actually she has a very good nose for piles, so if you next time you want to hunt for piles or holes, ask her.
Yeah, absolutely, and this place was so spotless that, I mean, the Butte-Chaumont, that I felt it was absolutely scary and terribly somehow unfriendly. I would like to start with one question, because you said a pile is a hole and a hole is a pile. And how can we be part of you? And I'm sorry, it's not creepy, but what about cemeteries? Because graves are piles and holes at the same time, and we are part of them. We build them and we are part of them. So would you go document some piles in a cemetery, or it's just because I have a twisted mind? No, sorry, Laura.
Actually, yes. We went very fast to cemetery Montparnasse. Montparnasse cemetery, but it was really closing. So we got in when the bell was ringing. So we were just like galloping through the whole cemetery. We found, like a very, not this kind of pile. We were also hoping for piles of flowers or, I mean, in this case, of course, you can see also how different cultures are, like how cemeteries also look super different, because I remember in Netherlands I was seeing this, like, I know that in Estonia you really make a hole, but then in the Netherlands you really see this, it's like there is this plastic, it's very geometrical also, like the way how you make a hole for a coffin. And I also never really see like a pile of sand, because probably it's taken away and then brought back with a machine again. But in Estonia you normally have the pile next to it, so you can kind of see what has been taken out. Yeah, but here it was very clean, the cemetery. Like there was no, we only saw tiny little stones on, but it was not really a pile, so this is why I didn't add it now. So we became also a bit specific about that. But I mean, as a thought, I think these piles or mounds also the very ancient cemeteries, or of course the same thing about transformation and how different bodies turn into other bodies. And I think there is something very beautiful, or also the soil and also compost pile. I mean, there is all these connections. I mean, we were not maybe having so much time to think about this because we were also busy with really the concrete piles that we could find.
But one of the first things that we said, actually, when we found the very first pile, I think, or the second pile, was we did make that connection with the burial mounds from ancient, prehistoric times when they would bury, I guess, special people for whatever reason. They were special, different reasons, I suppose. And they'd make a pile on top of them, which is maybe still visible today in many cases. And we were talking about how they also put the treasure inside, inside the burial mound. And that this is, it makes sense that you would use a mound to put both the body, which is kind of like the waste. So many piles are made of waste, but at the same time, the treasure, which is like signaling, is often treasure that maybe they're going to use in their next life, or that signals that their actual value beyond the waste of their body, like their social significance. So it's like this combination that we thought, in fact, all piles contain within them this combination of waste and treasure.
Yeah, like this. No, yeah, like a compost pile, but also all the other piles in a way that they are turning this, which seems waste for us, but it is being turned into this gold of soil or gold of for other lives in a way.
In the pictures you showed of your selection of finding of piles in Paris, all of them but one were human-made. So my question is it because you didn't find any non-human-made pile, or because there is some anthropocentric drift to human-made piles, or a choice?
No, I think it's because we were in a city. So even to find the rabbit pile was because we were in a relatively remote park where there were plenty of space and habitat for rabbits. Of course, if you go, like when I do field work, I see piles all the time which are made by insects or made by small mammals or made by the tree dropping the leaves. But that kind of thing doesn't really happen in a place like Paris, or even if the tree drops its leaves, they're made into they're a pile, and then they're put into some other pile, and then they're gone. They're taken to be put in a larger pile. So many of these piles, like as we saw there, many of them are hidden behind a barrier. It's as though they're trying to mark them as waste, so you don't misunderstand why it's there, because it shouldn't be there. Because piles really, most piles are kind of read as something that shouldn't be there. And then there were some exceptions, like the pile of books in the window, or there are ways you can frame a pile as like it's supposed to be here. But this is kind of an interesting aspect of which piles are allowed to be where, which we saw, but I don't think we didn't like analyze that in much depth.
I'll give you the floor very soon, but I have another question, because I was what was striking for me is that you somehow define your methodology after having started your pile hunting. And why is it so? Because Meredith, you have a very precise methodology in your research as a scientist, and Marit, you have also some very defined methodology in your artwork, which goes also with a lot of protocols. So why did not you design for a methodology that would cross the two, or that would be different, and why did you start it before defining the methodology? Do you understand what I mean? Okay. I
think for me it is also a way of. I don't know if I call it methodology, but in a way, the way that I have to first encounter something or someone, or yeah. So and then I can somehow go from there. So it is. I mean, I also want to say that we were trying to listen to the piles, or I mean, this interviewing, of course, it's a bit. It's just a word.
It's a metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a metaphor. But somehow this like listening to a pile and then also seeing. I mean, in this case also, I was really thinking that we would also start making our own piles and all this would happen. But this is also like, this is something that happens in your head, but then when you are actually doing it, then something else happens. And I somehow feel like it's, at least for me, it's always good to trust that and not to try to force something also to come forth. And I think this is also what made our process so enjoyable. I mean, I know Meredith already earlier as well, but we never worked together, and somehow also this short amount of time, but at the same time the intensity of walking and seeing and also talking and also touching, and it was very, it was very enjoyable. Maybe it's difficult how it comes through, like also just from images, but at the same time, I mean, it's not also like an artwork for experiencing for others, but somehow now it was like something to experience for us, and I think this is like a practice also of noticing and putting your attention and also still asking certain questions, and exactly that Meredith has her own very rich background and I'm very inspired by that, and I have something that I kind of have in my baggage or in my bag, so yeah, or in my carrier bag, so I think this is interesting when it was also not like that. I felt like we need to forcefully mix our practices, because I think that is something that then come later. Because first you also have to get to know each other, how you walk, how you like sit down, how you actually describe a certain thing. So then things can happen, I feel.
Because I think when Marit first arrived and we met like in the morning on the first day, and Marit said to me like, "Oh Meredith, I want to do a science project. Like let's do a science methods." And I said, "Marit, no, I want to do an art project." So somehow we had, I mean, it's not that we actually disagreed, but of course we each wanted to use the other person's method because it's more fun to try something different, right? So what we eventually did is somehow, I mean, it doesn't look scientific at all, and it's not intended to, but I think at the same time, it's not super different than what I actually do in the field when I'm doing science field work, because the questions we asked are very interpretive questions, and of course the answer is speculative, let's say, right? Some of them are more speculative than others, but I also, when I do field work, there's a lot of interpretation that goes into it to interpret, like a very basic thing. For example, if you see a tree with multiple trunks, is this one tree that has grown 5 trunks after being cut down, or is it 5 separate trees, or is it like one tree with 1 trunk and another with 4, whatever. So you have to do this kind of even very basic interpretation to know if you're dealing with 1 thing or 2 things or 5 things. And so there's always a lot of interpretation that goes with or before and also after the measurements that you maybe have as a method. So in some sense, just to have a standard set of interpretive questions that we ask every pile is not so different than what I would do. It's just different questions.
It's just a different way to put it, in a way, or not looking for exact or precise result, or.
Well, we're getting the kind of answers to the questions that are useful to us, and this is the point, right?
Ok. Ok, j'ai beaucoup monopolisé la parole. À vous. Wait. We need to record because.
I mean, as an artist and gardener, I was very surprised that you put so much attention to the temporary hills in Jardin de Plantes, because I mean they're very temporary. You just work with that, and the place you have shown of the container. I mean, they have to protect it because people are putting the garbage in, or children playing is kind of safety. Well, I was asking myself if you have ever done a pile yourself with earth or with cement or with stones? Why are you so attached to? And do you know about how to build a pile, how much work it is if you do it by shuffle or machine and everything? And about the natural piles, I mean, in Jardin des Plantes you won't find rabbit holes and piles, but if you go to other places in Paris you find them very often.
I think there were several comments, but let's see. I think, I mean, I've made different kinds of piles in my life, like book piles for sure, like the one we photographed. Piles of unwashed dishes, piles of unwashed clothes.
What it helps is earth piles.
Like earth, but I mean, I don't know. The earth pile is not the primordial pile either. It's just another kind of pile. But I don't. I mean, I guess I've probably made little earth piles in my life. But of course, there's a different practice of making piles for every pile, and each pile therefore has a different structure, a different function, a different social function as well, I suppose.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I think it's it's an interesting question because, one thing is the material of the pile, what is the thing that you make pile of, and then other thing is how do you make a pile, right? So it's also sometimes you can really just throw things and see if it makes a pile, but this also when I showed this thing with the stones, right? The very carefully laid structure. It's a totally different. When I was also reading about one of these, there is really all these steps of choosing the right stones, and then also what is the weight, and there is even this act of you have to listen to the stone, and this is something I would like to try. And actually even more going back to the, let's say where I come from, or how in the island where my grandfather was born, there they made this stone, not fences but stone walls. But very tiny ones. It's not like walls that you don't see, but it's more just to mark also. So a little bit more like the rabbit stuff. So, but this is also really it's a very hard work, and you really have to go to a person who teaches you how to do it. So this is something I would like to do. But previously I have been doing let's say less organized piles of stones as well, because this is my I just also love to work with stone. But not really big ones, or not really anything that and also with holes, I know that it takes so much effort to actually, let's say, dig a big hole, right? I mean, it's also such a I guess a very loaded process of doing it, because it's kind of always this grave thing comes, or something that you have to bury, but it can also be a very light practice, I think. But yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
Thank you. A really simple question. How do you imagine this project to continue?
Simple question.
I have to say one thing first, is that this residency is only 2 weeks, which is extremely short. So it frames also the kind of energy, rhythm in work. And they're finishing on Monday. So this is short, intense, and sorry. I think it was important to. It's not a 2-month residency that they would have walked the entire Paris area and spend many hours together.
Yeah, but I just feel one very good thing that is already coming out of it is at least I feel now even more inspired. I mean, also already all these questions, and even, I mean, I also still need to process all this. It's not, I try to also have different things, like a diary, and I had a field notebook, and then also, but then at the same time you come back in the very late in the evening, and then I did all this documentation, and you really also think about some of the things at night, but in one moment, and then the next day it's other piles and another location. So it's super. I really like to work like this, but I also see that it's piling up. So I need to I need to really. I mean, I'm not very good with. I like to pile up also, in myself, but in one moment I also see when it's too high, it still also kind of can collapse. So, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's So what I wanted to say was this: that I'm even more inspired now about piles and holes, because that's what also happened. That one thing is when you put methodology on something, it's a different thing. So now also I'm thinking like if we would analyze this, or of course I actually like more the collecting part and what happens there, and maybe the transformation then also happens to be not a methodology, and then what comes out or what is the outcome of data, but maybe it's actually something more like an experience. I don't know, literally I'm making our own piles, or...
We did make our own pile. Yeah.
Ah, yes, one done. But...
Yeah, and I guess similarly, I mean, really it's Marit's residency and work, so we'll see where it goes together, if it goes together between us, or where it will go between us from here. But I think that the idea of piles as the primordial technique, as a kind of, and the basis of all ecology, is kind of seductively simple, but in a kind of way that brings in lots of complex ideas. So for me, I think it's really fun to play with that more, and to do so by making piles, and because just this pile will intellectually transform into some other thing over time, I think, but we don't know what yet.
Is Debbie still there? Or is the connection?
Yes.
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 Can you show
Go ahead.
your face?
Certainly.
Okay, better. And maybe I will call Laura for the final questions, if you don't mind. We do have another microphone somewhere, I believe. Yeah, you will be. You can't read. Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a large question about art-science collaboration, and a question that I did not ask you, Laura and Debbie, before, that how your collaboration started, and obviously it already changed the direction of a project. So I think it's very interesting because you started with an idea, you started the collaboration, it changed. Both of you had met before but never worked together, and obviously the project is developing while being built. I mean, it's so I would like both of the two teams to say a few words about what it means, this art-science collaboration in those specific projects here. Maybe Laura, you start, and then we'll ask Debbie.
For me, for example, when we began the drone search, I had no idea the level of I had no idea the detail and how much more we could do with the technology for the project. So it's very interesting exchanging ideas and moving project in a direction that I had no, it just changed the direction of the project dramatically. I'll leave it. Maybe you want to go, Debbie?
Yeah, thank you. So Laura sent me an email saying that she had read an article I'd written on the Women and Drones website, where I'd stated that potentially drones could be used in the search or monitoring, surveying rare species such as cycads. And she called my bluff and said, I've read this article, I'm working on this project, would I like to collaborate? So it was very fascinating for me. Definitely, I've never worked on an art-science collaboration. I'm very much a scientist. I'll be leaving all the artwork up to Laura. But it was very fascinating and a great opportunity to be able to try using the drone and the sensor in just ways we haven't used it before. So it was a very exciting collaboration for me. And as has been alluded to, the project is evolving as we go, and that's very exciting. And drone work really is like that, because the use of drones in the conservation sectors is very new. So there is no recipe to follow. So you're kind of figuring things out as you go, which is a lovely space to be in, to be trying and experimenting. And you try something, it didn't work, you try it again. So definitely we're only at the beginning of this project, so we'll carry on. But thank goodness Laura reached out.
Meredith, do you want to add something to this collaboration, or do you think you have already answered?
Well, we can say how we met, I suppose, yeah? When was it, 2018? Yes, we met at an artist residency in Biella with several artists together. It was also like a kind of art science theme, in fact. And yeah, so we met there. We didn't do any work together, but we just spent like a week or two together. I forget how long it was, but
a week, yes,
a week together. So we know each other since then, and we kept talking about different things. And I don't remember precisely where the idea for this project came from. I think I was thinking about piles in this ecological sense, vaguely for some time, and then I guess I said something about it. I made a post on Instagram or something, and then you saw it. Yeah.
Yes, this is how it was. I mean, there was also like this same thing about the holes and the piles, and just somewhere in the periphery, I always think about it. Also, I mean, in context to stones and in mines and quarrying, and how when you take a big chunk of something somewhere and you move it somewhere else, how we don't really see it, but then it always creates disruptions, and it changes something in the landscape very drastically. But also the small ones, like if you see a mole coming out, I mean, it's also there is a hole, but there's also a pile, and just these again very simple things, but they have always. I never made a work about them, but they were there. And then I remember, yes, Meredith was sharing this really nice. There were like it was a sequence of images of there were like anthills and different kind of mounds. Of also very, I really liked also that it really looked different. There were like old photos, and there was like maybe a drawing, and so it was these different techniques. And then it also hit me that but it's so interesting. I think it also actually a little bit came from this book, this idea of archaeology also, like what we do as humans, and what is this digging, and what is this, what is in the soil that is so valuable, but also we also put waste and like really things that don't even compose. So, I mean. A bit these topics, but then it started. And Meredith actually also posted the open call. So, and then I really thought that you are connected to it somehow, and I was really, of course, I want to work with you. But then, and this is how we happen to be here.
And I have another, maybe the last question. I don't know. Maybe everybody is starving, and probably this question is targeting first to the scientist. This project, the overall project, is called, the subtitle is Biodiversity Crisis and Plant Resistance. And it turns out that the two scientists involved with the artist are conservation scientists, which I find it quite stunning, actually. And my question would be, is this conservation issue not more an anthropological and anthropocentric issue before being an ecological issue? What is your take on this desire of preserving and keeping alive, and specifically when it's targeted toward plants and nature? Well, I know. Now we have. You have 3 seconds each.
I just think we have a moral obligation to save things. I don't believe we have a right to make other species go extinct. So if I can contribute in a very small way to saving species, then that's something I'd really like to do.
Marit?
Yeah, well, I think I agree with that. And I guess also, but there are many reasons why people are actually motivated to save species, and the particular ways that they do so vary and have different end goals. So, in fact, I think people can be motivated for many different reasons, and there's not really one reason or one. It's not that there should be one reason. I think any reason is perfectly fine, and there are lots of them. So,
Laura, do you want to add something to why should we preserve and conservation nature?
I think the one thing to say biodiversity is to keep ourselves alive, like without plants and not restoring the ecosystem or not preserving species, and we're putting ourselves at risk.
No, I just cannot stop thinking about piles. So I just think also that this is kind of a nice model also for this, like something that looks maybe boring or looks like it's not important or something that, yeah, in a way it might be actually very essentially important also. I mean, exactly also from a human perspective as well. That, yeah, I mean, of course, it's important to take care. But yeah, I mean, I agree also with Meredith about this, that there are different reasons and motivations, and yeah, but that's all part of the pile.
Well, thank you to the four of you. Thank you to everyone that came tonight. I'm very grateful to see you. I'm going to switch to French for a sec. Donc, merci à tout le monde. C'est la dernière rencontre laser de la saison. Nous verrons ce que nous ferons à la rentrée. Déjà, je peux vous annoncer que le 23 et le 24 septembre, j'organise deux après-midi de rencontres et de conférences autour de l'art lié à l'espace extraterrestre, avec pour thème les imaginaires contemporains de l'espace, les imaginaires contemporains multiculturels de l'espace. Voilà, pour trouver le titre entier. Donc, si vous avez envie d'être tenu au courant et si vous n'êtes pas dans mes fichiers, ben, vous me laissez vos coordonnées. Et maintenant, ben, je vous rejoins tous autour d'un verre et de la suite du buffet. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Thank you, Marit, Meredith, Laura, and Debbie. Thank you for having been online that way. And everybody comes to Ars Electronica in September, where you will see the work by Laura. And we have probably a round table and more things. And anyway, Ars Electronica is always worth it. So please come and join us. Thank you.